I can tell you've been through something haunting. Maybe you don't even fully understand it yet, how one night, one decision can unravel what you believed was real. I've read the stories you provided, and each one feels tethered to a darker truth lurking in quiet moments. The tales all carry this weight, a desperate need for closure or understanding after reality twisted into horror. Whether it's a room marked by suicides that reaches out for more souls, a house shadowed by a whistling entity who grants small blessings in exchange for obedience, or the narrative of a mother torn from her child by violence, each event pushes at the edges of belief. Your experience, whatever it is, doesn't have to make sense to anyone else. The truth might even resist logic entirely, as with these other stories.
All right, I'll take you deeper. It starts with something small, barely noticeable, a whisper that gnaws at your thoughts, a shadow that stretches a bit too far, but then it grows. Soon, that nagging feeling becomes a full-blown terror you can't reason away, like the night Lydia and Becca heard the grinding of the window in the infamous dorm room 733, or the chill that crept up the spine of a child as he heard the familiar whistle moving past his home each night at precisely 3:03 a.m. And then, there's the aftermath that leaves you sitting alone in an empty house, listening to every sound, wondering if it's real or if you're still caught in the night's nightmare. This is the part that no one tells you. The haunting doesn't end when the night is over. It lingers, infesting every part of your life, every ordinary moment. You might feel relief when morning comes, but deep down, you know it's only a brief reprieve, because once you've witnessed the impossible, you can't ever truly go back. You're not alone, and the others have been where you are, eyes wide open and minds torn between disbelief and dread. That girl who survived the suicide room thought she could simply change rooms, leave the terror behind, but it was never going to be that easy. She looked into the mirror, expecting to see her own reflection, and instead saw room 733, the door padlocked shut, the windows open and waiting like eyes in the dark. No matter where she turned, it followed. Or the child in that quiet neighborhood, who thought he could listen to the whistling safely as long as he never looked. But it's not that simple, is it? Once that line is crossed, there's no coming back. He felt the breath of it, cold against the window he was forbidden to open. And then it started knocking from every side, trapping him in his own home, his reality splintered, his innocence stolen forever. When I read the story of that girl, still raw from the loss of her mother, her life splintered apart by the sudden cruelty of fate, it felt too real. There she was, staring down at the world her mother had left behind, walking in the shadow of every memory, trying to make sense of why her stepfather would do such a thing, trying to piece together the hidden darkness she never knew was lurking right there beside her, waiting. And when it all clicked into place, the way her mother's body was left, the precision of it, the feeling of cold, calculated evil, she realized it was no act of blind rage, but something far colder, something that had been waiting, silent, until the night it decided to tear her life apart. But here's the thing, and maybe this is what you're realizing now, once something like this touches your life, it becomes part of you. It follows you, like a shadow you can't shake, lurking in the cracks of your mind. And the worst part? You never know when it's going to reach out again. I get it. This thing, whatever happened to you, it feels like a wound that never heals. Every time you start to feel even a shred of normalcy, it opens again, as raw as the first time. Look at that kid, Holden, who couldn't resist looking. All it took was one glance past that shutter, one look he wasn't supposed to take, and his life was forever shattered. The whispers had warned him, told him not to look, but temptation is a dangerous thing, and curiosity has a way of turning into regret. Now, that whistling isn't just a sound in the night, it's a shadow on his soul. Every time he closes his eyes, he hears it. Every moment of quiet, he's there again, hearing that dreadful tap tap tap, something outside his window that's only grown more patient and relentless since he looked. Or that girl from the dorm, who thought she was safe during the day, that the horror confined itself to the night. But evil has no rules. Just as she let her guard down, she glimpsed something in the mirror herself, and yet not herself, standing in the forbidden room with windows open wide like hungry jaws. She'd seen into a part of reality she couldn't undo, and the knowledge was already starting to eat away at her sanity. No exorcism, no superstition would help. The only choice left was to run, and even then, she knew it might not be enough, and the one who lost her mother, the pain of that night unfolding again and again as she replayed every detail. She thought she understood her stepfather, thought he was family, but that familiarity only made the betrayal more vicious, the memory more insidious. Even as she stood in her mother's little office, clinging to the last scraps of her life before the darkness came. She knew that nothing would ever feel safe again, and as the questions clawed at her mind, she couldn't help but feel that the answer was there, hidden in plain sight, waiting to strike again if she let her guard down for even a second. So, maybe this thing that happened to you, this thing no one would believe, it's just the beginning. You've looked where you shouldn't have. You've glimpsed a corner of the darkness that doesn't let go, and now it's waiting, watching for you to step too close again.
The real horror is the waiting. That gnawing dread, that dark certainty that whatever it was, it isn't done with you. Each of them, Holden, Becca, the grieving daughter, thought they'd reached a breaking point, that the worst was over. But that's the lie darkness tells you. You think it can't get any worse, and then it finds another way in. Holden, that poor kid, still wakes every night at 3:03 a.m. He knows better than to look out the window, but the silence gnaws at him. His family hears him sobbing quietly in his room, trapped by a darkness that stole something from him he can't get back. They may never understand fully. He's changed now. He's tasted the terror outside the window, and deep down, he knows that whatever came that night might not be finished with him yet. Becca and Lydia, they tried to forget what happened in room 733. They wanted to believe it was just a story, just a trick of the mind. But that place took something from them, something they may never reclaim. Becca's nightmares are always the same. She's back in the hall, staring at that padlocked door, but this time it opens. She can see the dim light inside, and then there's something in the shadows watching her, pulling her closer. Every time she jerks awake, gasping, and tries to convince herself it's over. But the feeling never fades, that certainty that she's left a part of herself behind in that room, and it's waiting for her to come back. And the daughter who lost her mother, she's haunted in a way none of us could ever understand. She knows her stepfather didn't just snap, he planned it. The calculated coldness of his actions haunts her, but it's more than that. It's the feeling that there's something she missed, a piece of the story that hasn't yet surfaced. Something dark. She looks at her mother's journals, her paintings, trying to find answers. But the silence in that little office feels like it's hiding secrets, her stepfather's final secrets, perhaps. She can't shake the feeling that there's something else, something just out of sight, lurking in the remnants of her mother's life, and she fears it may come for her next. And you, whatever happened to you, I think you know this too. You can feel it, can't you? This darkness, it's not done with you. You can run, you can try to bury it, but it's there waiting.